Hi, it's Dr. Greg Jantz as a counselor and educator and founder at The Center, a place of hope, celebrating 40 plus years as we are here today, seeing lives changed for good. That's our byline, our vision, changing lives for good. And I want to talk about a graceful life. After doing this for a while, I come to understand humble, grace, are key components to emotional health. Let's define grace. Grace can be, and there's, let me say, faith-based grace, spiritual grace. There's grace that we can practice and give others. And I'm going to just interject here. My personal is there's a God-given grace. That's also a part of this. There's unmerited favor. Grace. It's kindness, it's compassion, it's even forgiveness. And it is living a graceful life. I've learned this not only from personal experience, but my wife had a diagnosis of cancer. We had 2 very dark years. Lots of chemo, lots of uncertainty, and this was a period of time in our family that my wife began creating a journal, which was a gratitude journal, and each day, despite how she was feeling and despite chemo and despite sickness, she would begin to write in a gratitude journal. I share that because she's maintained that now for quite some time. It's thousands of gratitudes, and she says it's one of the things that has taught me to live a grace-filled life. So grace is not a weakness. Grace is powerful. It requires strength to even forgive and to be graceful towards others. It's not about being a doormat. Grace says that I can have healthy boundaries and still forgive myself and forgive others. It's not about perfection. It's about, if I'm graceful living, I'm learning. I can tell you that grace matters for mental health. We don't hear this talked about. Was never in a class for any of my degrees, but it is a key component. Holding on to past anger, hurt, resentment creates internal toxicity. And practicing grace, living grace, begins to release that burden and that toxicity. Living gracefully improves all of our relationships. Will build, I made a note, stronger, more meaningful connections and relationships. It fosters self-compassion, which is we're able to extend grace to others, but oftentimes very difficult to do for ourselves. Grace promotes gratitude, which promotes a sense of optimism for my future. I can practice and extend grace to others. First step, listen before reacting. Don't over-personalize and absorb somebody else's anger, even if it's towards you. Hold. Okay, listen before reacting. We need to do more about understanding where others are coming from, and we can still have a relationship and not have to agree. Well, most of the time we can, and not agree with everything that they are saying or doing. We also know that grace allows us to accept mistakes and experiences rather than punish ourselves. Grace is important when we're not seeking vengefulness and retaliation. Do we see plenty of that? It never builds bridges and never makes us or the other person healthy. So choose to release resentments. Don't let ourselves become toxic. I wrote a little book, which is a great book, and it's a life-changing book, and it talks about dealing with toxic people. What do? We don't want to be toxic ourselves. We got to set ourselves free. Living a graceful, grace-filled life is a life of gratitude. And I mentioned forgiveness several times, and anger and hurt and resentment, because that's the biggest thing that holds us captive, so that we do not live the life that we could with graceful living. Oh, yes. It makes a huge difference how we feel about ourselves, our health, and our relationships with others, and to have an optimistic future. Now, if you're stuck in trauma, it's hard to get there, and sometimes we need to get additional help. check out what we're doing at the center, A Place of Hope, changing lives for good.